My grandson's 7th birthday was 3 days away when my son-in-law called to inform me that attending would cost me $4,000. He said it casually, like he was quoting a price for tree removal. I told him I'd think about it, then I drove to my safe deposit box and pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in 5 years. When I handed him that folder on the boy's birthday, he laughed in my face. 20 minutes later, he was throwing up in my driveway. Before I get into it, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'm sitting in Cedar Falls, Iowa right now, watching the Cardinals at the feeder. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope someone in your family treats you better than mine treated me. And if you stick around for the whole story, hit that subscribe button. There's more coming. My name is Hartwell Mosley. I'm 68 years old. I spent 41 years as a structural engineer for a firm that built bridges across 3 states. I've stood under 30,000 tons of concrete and trusted my own math to keep me alive. I tell you this because numbers don't lie to me. People do. People have lied to me my whole life, and I've usually let them because I figured the cost of catching them at it was higher than the cost of being fooled. I was wrong about that. I was wrong for a long time. The man on the phone that morning was Brent Calloway, my daughter's husband of 9 years. My only daughter, Sabine. She married him when she was 26, and I walked her down the aisle in a church in Des Moines because her mother had been gone 2 years by then, and I was all she had. I remember thinking on that walk that Brent's smile was a touch too wide, the kind of smile a man practices in the mirror. But Sabine and I looked at him like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life, and I kept my mouth shut, the way fathers are supposed to. The phone call came on a Tuesday. I was eating oatmeal at my kitchen table, reading the obituaries the way old men do, looking for names I recognized. Hartwell. He never called me Dad. Never even called me Mr. Mosley after the wedding. Just Hartwell, like we were colleagues at some firm. I wanted to discuss Wesson's birthday on Friday. I set my spoon down. I'm bringing him that train set he saw at the hobby shop. The one with the working signal lights. Right, well, about Friday. He cleared his throat in a way I'd come to recognize. The throat clearing of a man about to ask for something. Sabina and I have been talking about your level of involvement with the boys. We feel like every time you come over it disrupts our parenting structure. The boys get wound up. They expect things. It's actually a lot of work for us to reset them after you leave. I waited. I'd learned over the years that waiting was the most useful thing I could do with Brent Calloway. He always filled the silence eventually, and what he filled it with was always informative. So what we're proposing is that going forward, your visits are more of a formal arrangement. Compensated. $4,000 per visit. That covers our time, the disruption, the recalibration we have to do with the kids. It's actually a discount when you think about what an hourly rate would be. I picked up my coffee. It had gone cold. You want me to pay you $4,000 to attend my grandson's 7th birthday. I want you to compensate us for the labor your presence creates. There's a difference. And if I don't, then we'll have to reconsider whether these visits make sense at all. Sabine agrees with me, by the way. This is a unified position. I almost laughed. Sabine agreed with him the same way a hostage agrees with the person holding the rope. She'd been agreeing with him for 9 years, and every year there was less of her to agree with anything. Let me think about it, I said. Don't take too long. Friday's coming. He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand and watched a cardinal land on the feeder outside the window. The bird ate a sunflower seed and flew away. And I thought about what it costs to feed a bird and what it costs to feed a man like Brent Calloway. And I thought about how I'd been doing the second one for 9 years, and the math had finally caught up with me. Let me tell you what I'd been paying for, in case you think I'm being dramatic. 4 years ago, Brent came to me and said his consulting firm had cash flow problems. He needed $18,000 to make payroll. He'd pay me back within 90 days. He showed me a business plan with charts on it. I gave him the money because Sabine was 3 months pregnant with my second grandson, and she was crying on the phone about losing the house. 2 years ago, Brent's car got repossessed. He told me his accountant had made a mistake with the tax filing, and he needed $12,000 to fix it before the IRS came after him. I gave him the money because Wesson was about to start kindergarten, and Sabine said he needed stability. 18 months ago, Brent's mother died, and the funeral expenses ran higher than expected. So he said he needed $7,000. I gave it to him. I don't know if his mother actually died. I never met the woman in 9 years of marriage. He said she was estranged. I never questioned it. 3 years before any of that, before the loan started, I paid off the mortgage on their house in Bettendorf. $142,000. They were going to lose it. Sabine called me sobbing at 11 at night, said the foreclosure papers had come, said the boys would have nowhere to go. I drove to the bank the next morning and emptied a money market account I'd been building for 32 years. The account was supposed to be my retirement cushion, the money that would let me leave the firm at 65 instead of 68. Now I was 68, still working part-time as a consultant because the cushion was gone. My daughter wouldn't speak to me without her husband listening. My grandsons were 7 and 4 years old, and a man who'd never paid me back $1 of the $37,000 he'd borrowed wanted to charge me $4,000 to attend a birthday party. I sat at the table for a long time. Then I got up and walked to the bedroom closet and pulled down a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside the shoebox was a key. The key opened a safe deposit box at First Iowa Savings on Mulberry Street. I hadn't opened that box in 5 years. I drove there that afternoon. The folder inside the box was thick. I'd had a lawyer named Pelham Voss draw it up the week before I paid off Sabine and Brent's mortgage. Pelham Voss was a man who'd built bridges with my firm for 20 years before going to law school in his 50s. He understood structures. He understood that a thing could look solid and not be. When I'd come to him with the mortgage payoff plan, he'd done what good lawyers do. He'd asked me uncomfortable questions. "Hartwell, are you confident your son-in-law will honor a verbal agreement to repay you?" I'd said yes. I'd believed it. "Are you confident he wouldn't, say, treat the money as a gift in 3 or 5 or 10 years if it became convenient to do so?" I'd hesitated. Pelham had nodded. "Let me draw something up. We'll structure it so the money is technically a loan secured against the property. You hold a junior lien. They make payments to you on a schedule. If they default, you have legal recourse. If they don't default, no harm done. The paperwork sits in a drawer." I'd agreed because Pelham was my friend and I trusted him more than I trusted my own judgment about Brent. We structured it as a private mortgage. Brent and Sabine had signed the papers without reading them carefully. Brent had been distracted because he'd just driven a new BMW into the parking lot of Pelham's office, and he was annoyed about a scratch on the bumper. Sabine had signed because Brent told her to. I'd signed because Pelham had said it was prudent. Then I'd put the folder in the safe deposit box and forgotten about it. 5 years. Brent and Sabine had never made a single payment to me on the secured loan. The terms required quarterly payments of $1,500. They'd missed every quarterly payment for 5 years. By the strict terms of the contract Brent had signed, they were in default. By the strict terms of the contract, I held a lien against the house in Bettendorf that I could call due in full at any time. I sat in the bank's little private viewing room with the folder open on the desk and read every page. Pelham had been thorough. He'd built that contract the way I used to build bridges, with redundancies and safety factors. There was nothing Brent could do about it. The signature was his. The notary stamp was real. The lien was filed with Scott County. It was all there, all legal, all ready. I closed the folder. I sat there breathing for a few minutes. Then I drove home. That evening I called Pelham. He's 76 now, semi-retired, but he still takes my calls. "Hartwell, it's been a while." "Pelham, that mortgage paperwork. The one for my daughter's house?" "I remember. You ready to use it?" I almost cried hearing him say that. He'd known. 5 years ago he'd known this day was coming. He hadn't said it out loud, but he'd built the bridge knowing the storm would come. "I think I might be. Tell me what's happening." I told him. The $4,000, the birthday. The 9 years of being treated like a wallet with a face. He listened the way he always listened. No interruptions, just the occasional small noise that meant keep going. When I finished, he said, "Hartwell, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you doing this because you're angry, or because you're protecting your grandsons?" I thought about it for a long time. "Both," I said finally. "I'm angry. I won't pretend I'm not. But if I don't do something now, those boys are going to grow up watching their father treat their grandfather like an ATM, and they're going to learn that's how you handle the men who love you. I can't let that be the lesson." "All right, then. Come to my office Thursday morning. I'll have the paperwork ready." "What paperwork?" "The notice of default, the demand for full payment within 30 days, and a separate filing for grandparent visitation rights, just in case he tries to weaponize the boys, which he will." "You think of everything." "I think of bridges, Hartwell. The ones I built with you taught me to plan for failure modes. People aren't different from steel." I went on Thursday. I signed the papers. Pelham notarized them himself and put them in a fresh manila folder, the same kind I used to use for project specs. He handed it to me at the door of his office. "When you give him this on Friday," he said, "don't say much. Let the paperwork speak. He'll either rage or he'll bargain. Either way, you walk out. Don't engage. The court will engage for you. What if Sabine is there?" He paused. "Sabine signed the contract. She signed it as joint owner. She knew what she was signing." "I know that's hard to hear." "She didn't read it. That's not a defense in court. And Hartwell, with respect, she's 41 years old. She's not a child. She's been letting this man harm her father for 9 years. At some point, that becomes her choice, not just her husband's." I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat next to the wrapped train set for Wesson. I parked in my garage and sat there for a while with my hands on the steering wheel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Wesson at 4 years old, the first time I took him fishing at Pleasant Creek. He'd been so small. The life vest came up to his chin. He'd caught a bluegill on his second cast and screamed so loud he scared every fish in the lake. I'd had to put my hand over his mouth, both of us laughing. And he'd looked up at me with the kind of trust that breaks your heart, because you know you can't always deserve it. I thought about my younger grandson, Maeve. He's 4. Quiet kid, builds elaborate things with blocks and gets upset when anyone touches them. He always wants to sit on my lap when I visit, just sits there, doesn't say much, leans against my chest. Brent had started calling him weird about a year ago, saying it where the boy could hear, saying it where I could hear. I thought about my Sabine, 8 years old, riding her bike with no hands down our driveway, hair flying behind her, yelling, "Daddy, look." She'd been the best of me, the proof that I'd done something right with my life. I thought about the woman who'd opened the door for me last Christmas, hollow-eyed, thinner than she should have been, looking past me to make sure her husband approved of how she was greeting her own father. I'd brought a coffee cake that morning. Brent had taken one look at it and said they were doing low-carb now. The cake had gone in the trash in front of me. Sabine had said nothing. Wesson had cried a little because he wanted some cake. Brent had told him to grow up. I should have done something then. I should have done something 100 times before that. I'd been telling myself for years that keeping the peace was the same as keeping my family. But peace bought from a man like Brent isn't peace. It's just a quieter form of losing. Friday came, Wesson's birthday. I dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, the same way I dressed when I went to court as an expert witness back in my engineering days. I put the wrapped train set in the back seat. I put the manila folder on the passenger seat. I drove the 43 minutes from Cedar Falls to Bettendorf with the radio off. The house in Bettendorf is a 2-story colonial on a cul-de-sac, beige siding, 2-car garage, a maple tree in the front yard that I helped Brent plant the summer Wesson was born. There were balloons tied to the mailbox, blue and silver, Wesson's favorite colors. I parked behind Brent's BMW, which had been recently washed. There was a second car in the driveway too, a silver Audi I didn't recognize. Brent's friends, probably. He had a particular kind of friend, Men who wore expensive watches and talked about investments without ever saying what they invested in. I rang the doorbell with the folder under my arm and the wrapped present in my hands. Sabine opened the door. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater that hung off her shoulders. Her hair was longer than the last time I'd seen her, and there were grays at the temples that hadn't been there at Christmas. She was 41 years old, and she looked 50. "Dad." Her voice was small. "You came. It's my grandson's birthday." She stepped back to let me in. From the living room I could hear Wesson laughing, that high, pure laugh kids that age have, the one they lose around 10. I could hear Brent's voice talking over the children, telling some story to a woman who laughed too loud. "Grandpa." Wesson came running. He had a paper crown on his head and frosting on his chin. He hit me at full speed, and I had to set the present down to catch him. "Grandpa, I got a bike, a real bike, not a balance bike, with pedals, and I can almost ride it without the training wheels." "That's wonderful, buddy." Maeve appeared behind him, moving slower, watching me. He was holding a stuffed dinosaur by the tail. I knelt down, and he came and put his head against my shoulder without saying anything. He smelled like apple juice and child shampoo. I held him for a moment. Brent came in from the living room. He'd seen me through the window, I could tell. He'd had time to compose his face. He was wearing a polo shirt with a logo I didn't recognize and pants that probably cost more than my first car. "Hartwell, you made it." He glanced at the folder under my arm. "You bring the paperwork." I looked at him. There were 2 children in the room. I had decided ahead of time that I would not do this in front of the children. "I brought Wesson's gift," I said. "Wesson, can you take this in the kitchen and open it with your mom?" "Okay, Grandpa." He took the box. "Maeve, come on." The boys went into the kitchen with Sabine. I waited until they were out of sight. "Brent, can we step outside?" He smiled. The wide smile. "Sure, of course. Let me just tell our guests." He went into the living room. I could hear him saying something cheerful. The kind of cheerful that's a costume. Then he came back and walked past me out the front door. I followed him. He went down the walk to the driveway and stopped beside his BMW and turned around with his arms crossed and that smile still on his face. "All right. Cash or check?" I handed him the folder. He took it, opened it, started reading. I want to describe what happened to his face because I'm not sure I'll ever forget it. The smile stayed for the first page. By the second page, the smile had gone tight at the corners, the way a smile does when a man is forcing it. By the third page, the smile was gone entirely. By the fourth, his hand was trembling. He flipped through to the back, looking for what he'd find, the notarized signature, his own from 5 years ago. "What is this?" His voice had gone hoarse. "What the hell is this?" "You know what it is. This isn't real." "This isn't. We didn't sign a mortgage. You gave us that money. You signed a mortgage. So did Sabine. You just didn't read it. This is a fraud. This is some kind of trick." He flipped back to the front page. The notice of default. Demand for full payment, $142,000 plus accrued interest, due within 30 days. Or foreclosure proceedings. "You can't do this. I can. I am." "Sabine." He turned toward the house and yelled it. "Sabine, get out here." "Brent, lower your voice. The boys are inside. You think you can show up at my son's birthday with this? You think you can do this to me?" "I'm not doing it to you. I'm collecting on a loan you've owed me for 5 years. You were the one who set the price for being a grandfather. I'm just paying it back." He was breathing hard now. The folder shook in his hand. There was sweat starting at his hairline. "You're going to take my house. Over $4,000. Over a birthday party. Brent, I'm taking back my house. I never gave it to you. I lent you the money, and you signed a contract, and you never paid a cent of it back. You sat in my daughter's living room for 5 years on furniture you never paid for, in a house you never paid for, and you decided that wasn't enough. You decided I needed to pay you to see my own grandsons. You set this in motion. I'm just finishing it. He took a step toward me. I didn't move. I'd worked construction sites for 40 years. I'd watched men twice his size and twice as angry, and I knew what real menace looked like, and Brent Calloway didn't have it. He had bluster. He had the swagger of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. He took a step toward me and his foot caught on the edge of the driveway and he stumbled. And I could see the moment he realized I wasn't afraid of him. The moment he realized he'd never been the danger he thought he was. That's when he turned and threw up next to his BMW. Not from anger, from fear. The kind of fear a man feels when he understands all at once that the structure he built his life on isn't structure at all, just papier-mâché he painted to look like steel. Sabine came out the front door. She'd heard him yell her name. She stopped at the edge of the porch when she saw him bent over, heaving in the driveway. "Brent, what's happening?" He couldn't answer. He just held up the folder. She came down the walk slowly. She took the folder from his hand. She read. I watched my daughter's face change. I watched her go through what he'd gone through, but slower. She turned to page 2. She turned to page 3. She got to the back page where her own signature was, in her own handwriting, and she stared at it for a long time. "Dad." She didn't look up. "Dad, what is this? You signed it 5 years ago, the day I paid off your mortgage. Pelin Voss had me structure it as a loan instead of a gift. Why? Because he was smarter than I was. He could see what I couldn't see, that this would happen one day." She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying yet. There was something else in her face, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Anger. Not at me. At herself. "Brent told me it was a gift. He told me you said it was a gift. He told me you said it was a gift. He lied. I know he lied." Her voice cracked. "I knew he lied at the time. I couldn't." Brent straightened up from the driveway, wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. "Sabine, don't listen to him. He's manipulating you. He's always manipulated you. This is exactly what he does." She looked at her husband. Just looked. The way you look at something you've finally seen clearly after years of not seeing. "Brent, be quiet." "What?" "I said be quiet." He started to say something else. She held up the folder. "This is my signature." "Did I read it?" "What?" "When I signed this, did I read it?" He hesitated. "You." "We were busy. You trusted me to handle it. So I didn't read it." "Sabine, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." She turned to me. "Dad, I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. Anything. How much money has he asked you for? Over the years?" "Total." I told her the 18,000, the 12,000, the 7,000, the mortgage payoff. The smaller amounts I hadn't even kept track of, 300 here, 500 there, things she didn't know about. She did the math in her head. I watched her do it. When she got to the total, she made a small sound, like she'd been hit. "You never told me about most of those." He asked me not to. He said it would worry you. It would have woken me up. That's what he didn't want. She turned back to Brent. He was still standing by the BMW, the color slowly coming back into his face, his mind working. I could see the wheels turning. He was figuring out his next move. Brent always had a next move. "Sabine, honey." He started toward her. "We can fix this. Your father is being unreasonable, but we can talk to him. Family talks. Family doesn't go to court. I can get the money. I have things in motion. There's a deal I've been working on. I haven't told you about it yet because I wanted it to be a surprise, but Stop. Stop talking. Sabine. There's no deal, Brent. There's never been a deal. There's never been a single deal in 9 years that wasn't somebody else's money you were spending. That's not fair. It's fair. It's the only fair thing I've said in 9 years. She handed the folder back to me. Her hand was steady. Dad, what do you want me to do? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who was my daughter, who had been my little girl, who I'd carried on my shoulders to the top of the lighthouse at Wisconsin Point when she was 6 years old, who I'd taught to drive in the parking lot of the Methodist church, who I'd given away to a man who didn't deserve to look at her, much less marry her. I want you to come home, Sabine. You and the boys. The house in Cedar Falls has 3 bedrooms. I haven't touched your old room since you left for college. There's space. There's enough. What about Brent? Brent has 30 days to pay me $142,000 or vacate the property. That's between him and the law. It's not your problem. And if I come with you, the boys, school, friends, you enroll them in Cedar Falls Elementary. They're 7 and 4. They'll adjust. Kids are made for adjusting. Adults are the ones who tell themselves they can't. She didn't answer right away. She turned and looked at the house. Through the front window, I could see Wesson and Maeve standing on the couch, peering out, watching us. Wesson had taken his crown off. Maeve was holding the dinosaur up to his face like he was hiding behind it. Brent. She didn't turn around. I want you to leave the house. Now. I want you to take your car and go to your friend's place, the one with the Audi, and stay there tonight. We'll talk Monday. Sabine, you don't get to tell me to leave my own house. I held up the folder. It's my house, technically. As of 30 days from now, formally. So I'm telling you. Brent looked at me. He looked at his wife. He looked at the BMW. I watched him calculate. The way he always calculated, looking for the angle, the play, the version of events where you came out ahead. This isn't over, he said. It is, actually, I said. It's pretty much exactly over. But you can fight it in court if you want. Pelham Voss says he's looking forward to it. He stood there a moment longer. Then he opened the door of his BMW and got in. He started the car. He backed out of the driveway too fast. He scraped the curb on the way out, and I heard something snap on the underside of the car. He drove off without looking back. Sabine stood in the driveway and watched him go. Then she sat down. Just sat down right there on the asphalt and put her face in her hands. I knelt next to her. I put my hand on her back. She was shaking. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For 9 years of it. Sweetheart, I knew most of it. Maybe not the dollar amounts, but I knew the shape of it. I knew what he was. I just kept telling myself it would get better. He'd grow up. He'd settle. The boys needed their father. Sabine. And I let him keep you out. I let him decide when you could come, and what you could bring, and how long you could stay. And the boys missed you, Dan. They missed you so much. Wesson asked me last week why you don't come over more. I told him you were busy. I wasn't busy. I know you weren't. I lied to my son about my own father. I sat down next to her on the driveway. The asphalt was warm from the morning sun. Across the street, Mrs. Trembath was watering her petunias and pretending not to look at us. I'd known Mrs. Trembath since Sabine was in middle school, back when this was a family neighborhood and people looked out for each other. Sabine, listen to me. You were trapped. People who haven't been trapped don't understand what it does to you. You stop being able to see straight. You stop being able to remember what straight looks like. It's not your fault. It's a little my fault. Maybe. A little. But the part that matters now isn't the fault. It's what you do next. She wiped her eyes on the sleeve of her sweater. She looked at me. I want to come home, Dad, just for a while. Until I can figure things out. Until I can, as long as you need. Both of the boys, too, as long as you need. She nodded. She stood up. She held out her hand, and I let her help me to my feet because my knees aren't what they used to be. We went back inside. The boys were still on the couch. The party guests were standing in the kitchen looking confused, trying to figure out if they were supposed to leave. Sabine handled it. She always was a good hostess when Brent let her be. She thanked everyone for coming. She said something had come up. She apologized for the inconvenience. She walked them to the door with grace. I'd forgotten she had. After they left, she knelt down in front of Wesson and Maeve. "Boys, I need to tell you something. Daddy and I are going to live apart for a little while. You're going to come stay at Grandpa's house for a bit. You'll get to see Grandpa every day. Is that okay?" Wesson looked at me, then at his mother. 7 years old. He understood more than I'd given him credit for. "Is Grandpa's house the one with the cardinals?" "Yes, buddy, the one with the cardinals. And I can ride my new bike there." "Yes." "Okay." He shrugged like it was nothing, like he'd been waiting for this. "Mom, are we still doing cake?" We did cake. Sabine and I and the boys, just the four of us at the kitchen table. We sang Happy Birthday. Maeve fell asleep in his chair before the candles were lit. Wesson blew them out and made a wish and wouldn't tell us what it was, but he looked at me when he made it. I helped Sabina pack a suitcase for each of the boys. Just enough for a week. We could come back for the rest. She packed her own things in a duffel bag, fast, like a woman who'd been mentally rehearsing it for years. I drove them all back to Cedar Falls. Maeve slept the whole way. Wesson sat in the back seat and asked me questions about the Cardinals. Sabine sat in the passenger seat and watched the road and didn't say much. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on. The way I always leave it, Sabine looked at the house she'd grown up in. The same beige siding I'd had repainted 3 years ago. The same maple in the side yard. The same flower beds her mother had laid out the year before she got sick. "Dad," she said quietly. I forgot how it smelled. I didn't ask her what she meant. I knew. That was 11 months ago. Brent didn't pay the $142,000. Of course he didn't. He hired a lawyer who tried to argue the loan was a gift and lost in 3 weeks. He hired another lawyer who tried to argue that Sabine's signature wasn't valid because she'd been emotionally coerced, which was rich coming from him. He lost that one too. The house in Bettendorf is in foreclosure now. By the terms of the original lien, the property reverts to me. I'm not keeping it. I'm selling it and putting the money in a trust for Wesson and Maeve. College funds mostly. Some of it for Sabine when she's ready. She's working again, first time in 7 years. Bookkeeping for a vet clinic in town. She's good at it. She likes the dogs. The divorce went through 8 months ago. Brent got nothing because there was nothing to get. He's living with his friend with the Audi, last I heard. He missed Wesson's first soccer game. He missed Maeve's preschool graduation. He sends a card on the boys' birthdays that Sabina reads first, before deciding whether to give it to them. The grandparent visitation paperwork Pelham filed turned out not to be needed. But I'm glad we filed it. Insurance, Pelham called it. A man like Brent always tries to weaponize the children. We made sure he couldn't. Wesson is 8 now. He's been riding his bike to my house for the last 3 months, just down the side street 2 blocks. He shows up most days after school with his backpack on, dumps his homework on my kitchen table, and asks for a snack. We do his math problems together. He's better at them than I was at his age. Maeve started kindergarten this fall. He still doesn't talk much. He still leans against my chest when he sits on my lap. He started building bridges with his blocks. He showed me one last week, a long span with 3 pillars, and asked me if it would hold a real car. I told him it depended on the materials. He nodded like he understood. And maybe he did. Sabine is 42 now. She started to look her age, instead of 10 years older than it. She laughs again, not all the time, but sometimes, in the kitchen, when one of the boys says something funny, I'll hear it from the next room, and I'll have to stop what I'm doing for a minute. I think a lot about that birthday, about the folder, about Brend throwing up in the driveway. I don't take pleasure in it. I want to be honest with you. I don't sit in my chair at night and replay it and feel good. I feel sad, mostly. I feel sad that it had to come to that. I feel sad for the years before, when I didn't act, when I told myself I was being patient and was really just being a coward. I feel sad for my daughter, who lost a decade of her life to a man who never deserved her. I feel sad for the boys who'll spend the rest of their lives understanding what kind of father they had. But I'll tell you what I don't feel. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I should have given him the $4,000. I don't feel like I should have let it slide one more time, kept the peace one more season, written one more check. A man told me once that the difference between a bridge that stands and a bridge that falls is whether the engineer was willing to say no to the people who wanted shortcuts. You have to be willing to be the bad guy. You have to be willing to draw the line where the line needs to be drawn, even if everyone you love is on the other side of it, because the alternative is that the bridge comes down with everyone on it. I drew my line. My family ended up on my side of it after all. If you've been listening this far, and you've got a Brent in your life, somebody who's been bleeding you slow for years, somebody who's taught your children that grandparents and parents and the people who love you are just resources to be extracted from, I want you to know it's not too late. It's not too late at 68. It probably isn't too late at 78 either. There's always paperwork somewhere. There's always a lawyer who'll listen. There's always a folder you can put together. The hardest part isn't the folder. The hardest part is deciding you're worth it, that your grandkids are worth it, that the next 10 years of your life don't have to look like the last 10. I should wrap up. The boys are coming over for dinner tonight. Sabine is making her mother's pot roast recipe, the one I haven't had in 22 years. Wesson wants me to teach him how to whittle, which I have no idea how to do. But I bought a book and a piece of pine, and I'm going to figure it out before he gets here. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me about the line you had to draw, or the line you wish you'd drawn. Tell me where you're listening from. I read every one of them, even when I don't reply. And tell me how you'd handle a son-in-law like Brent. I'm curious. I think a lot of you have stories like mine, and I want to hear them. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet. There's another one coming next week. I'm going to tell you about my brother-in-law, who tried to claim half my late wife's estate 40 years after she'd cut him out of her life. That one didn't end the way he expected either. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves out there, and if you've got people who love you, the real kind of love, not the kind that sends a bill at the end, hold them close. I'll see you next time. I've been thinking a lot about how I ended up sitting in that driveway next to my daughter while she cried into her sleeve. 9 years of small choices got me there. Every time I wrote Brent a check. Every time I told myself Sabine just needed more time. Every time I let him decide when I could see Wesson and Maeve, I was building the bridge that eventually had to fall. That's the part nobody tells you about being patient with the wrong man. Patience and surrender wear the same face. You don't always know which one you're practicing until you see the consequences walk through your front door. The reason Brent thought he could charge me $4,000 to see my own grandson is because I'd been training him to. For 9 years, I'd been showing him that there was no price too high for keeping the peace. He learned the lesson I was teaching. That's how cause and effect works in families. The man who never says no creates the man who never stops asking. I think about my Sabine sitting on that asphalt, and I understand something I didn't understand when I was 40. Decency isn't enough. A man can be decent his whole life and still leave the people he loves to drown. Because decency without backbone is just a slower form of cruelty. You have to be willing to be hard. Not cold, not cruel, but hard the way good steel is hard. The way a load-bearing beam is hard, because the people you love are standing on you whether you realize it or not, and if you can't bear weight, you have no business pretending to be a foundation. The trio I keep coming back to is character, judgment, and grit. Character is what you build before you need it. Pelham Voss had character because he made me sign that loan paperwork 5 years before I had the spine to use it. He saw further than I did. Judgment is what tells you when the storm has actually arrived, because Lord knows people like Brent manufacture fake storms constantly to keep you off balance. And grit is the thing that gets you out of your kitchen chair on the morning you finally have to do the hard thing. Grit is driving 43 minutes to a birthday party with a folder on the passenger seat and your hands not shaking. If you take anything from my story, take this. Loving your family doesn't mean letting your family destroy you. The grandkids don't need you to be a martyr. They need you to be standing. They need a grandfather who shows them what it looks like when a good man finally draws a line. That's the inheritance that matters, not the money. The line. I drew mine late. But I drew it, and the boys are sitting at my kitchen table tonight because of it.